Scuffed up a little bit here.
Many animals rely on a keen sense of smell to locate and follow their prey. However, two of nature's biggest predators, the big cats and man, share a common weakness in this respect. When they hunt, both have had to substitute eyesight and cunning for sense of smell. Our continent's first settlers, the American Indians, lived much more closely with nature than we do today. They adapted for their use many of nature's most clever tricks, including the ability to track their prey.
Off the trees, too.
Could be,
Looks like we're going that way.
right around that dead Indian tobacco.
Today, centuries later, the American continent's latest settlers are having to relearn the ancient art of tracking as a useful tool with a number of important and useful applications. The purpose of this videotape is to make you aware of the possibilities for tracking, or sign cutting as it's called, what it is, who can do it, and how it's done, and to point out some areas where it is a natural tool that can be used with extremely effective results. Utilizing the students at a tracking awareness training session in the mountains of eastern Oregon and along the Columbia River, we'll show you the rudiments of tracking.
Now, if stepping off the log,
Our purpose is to make you track aware, along with them. Our training exercises were organized by the Search and Rescue Advisory Council of the Oregon State Sheriff's Association, and were taught by one of this country's most able trackers, Joel Harden, of the U.S. Border Patrol's Blaine, Washington office. Joel has been an instructor at a number of these seminars in the Northwest. He brought together a team of experienced trackers. They were working with beginning and advanced teams from Search and Rescue, from Northwest law enforcement agencies, and from the military. With the beginners, Joel's purpose was to introduce them to what he calls sign. That is, the various clues left when man travels anywhere by foot.
It's a term used basically by Border Patrol sign cutters or trackers and people that we have taught over the years. The term sign comes from the discoverable evidence in deference to tracks. Most people, when we talk about tracking, think that we're looking for footprints as they would be going through a snowbank or through a patch of snow. And in fact, in reality, that's not it at all. Sign is the discoverable evidence that's left by the passing of a person.
One of Joel's main messages is that anywhere man walks, he leaves sign. And he emphasizes during the beginning of a training session, anyone can see sign. It's mostly a matter of looking, knowing what you're looking for, and correct interpretation.
Most people, in general speaking, people walk by placing one foot in front of the other and propel the body forward. As you move forward, the rear of the heel strikes the ground, much as it has done here, and then as the body weight is propelled forward by the muscle and bone structure, the weight rocks forward across the heel, leaving, generally speaking, a good, sharp, heavy impacted area across the heel, across then the arch of the foot or the instep onto the ball of the foot as the weight comes forward on the body to the ball of the foot, and stepping off of the toe then, actually coming off of the toe about the same time, the same instant as the next successive step is striking the ground with the back of the heel. So therefore we have one step rolling after the other.
The beginning teams are looking for several categories of sign left by man. Scuffs and scrapes are caused by footgear contacting ground, which is generally too hard to dent. They indicate motion, forward, backward, turning. Rolled rocks, cracks, or breaks of soil surface around larger rocks. These generally are caused by a person stepping on them. Small rocks, too, show sign most often because they have been rolled in the direction of travel and mashed into the surface soil. Compacting of small rocks or sand in a uniform manner and area consistent with the size or type of footgear being followed. Broken twigs, small particles of twigs which are broken and pressed in a way which looks like damage from a human foot. Compressed areas, areas the size and shape of the identified footgear which reflect, diffuse, or absorb the light in such a way as to show the negative or positive image of a print. Toe digs, indented areas in the shape and size of the toe on the shoe being followed. This corresponds to the pressure of the forward walking motion where a person has stepped off the toe, causing the matter under the toe pressure to be kicked slightly backward. Heel marks, the curved mark or impression on the ground surface made by the normal walking motion. Vegetation damage, the bruising or brushing or tearing of stems and leaves or ground cover that isn't consistent with animal or other natural activity. By the way, the number of feet and type of foot make it unlikely to confuse animal tracks with human sign, unless you're following a person who has 4 feet, which might be cloven or clawed, in which case we suggest you proceed with great caution. But Joel emphasizes, you've got to believe.
A lot of people don't believe that sign cutting works, but it really does work. On one occasion several years ago, I was called upon to assist in a search for a 4-year-old boy that had been lost for 5 days. When I arrived on the search scene, 450 to 500 people had exhausted themselves and every conventional search method. But because one alert, bright explorer scout on the first day of the search, who had been to a tracking class, located and isolated one skid mark that he thought could belong to a 4-year-old child, from that particular mark, it wasn't really a footprint at all, but just a mark, we were able to successfully follow the chain of sign from that place, the location, to where the boy was found.
Okay, the last one we actually used tracking was an archery hunter hunting in the high country up near Broken Top and Happy Valley area. He failed to come back to camp. Search and rescue was called. We called our tracking teams out. They tracked through the night. He was found approximately noon the next day, roughly 15 miles from the area. He had wandered in and out of a creek bed area and down the drainage, and they found him near Tumalo Falls. But it was through tracking. We had 4 tracking teams out, crisscrossing the trail, jumping ahead, cutting for sign ahead, and so on. And it was a successful search, and it was through tracking that they found him.
Since having tracking experience and the training and such, I've utilized it a lot in the area of investigation, in that we solved a lot of burglaries, rapes, runaways, and even attempted homicide utilizing the art of tracking. In the attempted homicide, we actually were able to create a blueprint of the crime. When the 4 suspects in the crime, we were able to recreate exactly how it occurred, in that the prime suspect that did the shooting, we showed exactly where he was let off near the residence, was able to go around the house, showing exactly where he went, cutting the phone lines, going around, shooting the victim, subsequently secreting himself a short ways away, and then shooting again at the victim when he was being transported to the hospital. They had no problem at all in convicting the individual, being able to show jury exactly how this happened, utilizing tracking as a method to recreate the crime.
Our trackers all have poles of one sort or another. These are sign cutting sticks. They are used to judge the prime sign area once a length of stride is established. Joel likes to measure from the tip of the toe to the back of the heel of the next step, but other ways to measure can be just as accurate. The sign cutting or tracking stick should be swung slowly in a 30-degree arc to the right and left of center over the prime sign area to help concentrate attention. Their sharp point is also good for marking sign, which we'll talk about a little later. As any tracker can tell you, it's not a gentleman's art. Sign is found by getting your nose close to the ground and examining the signs, particularly in tricky circumstances such as these. Sometimes the sign is beneath a top layer, and the tracker can feel it through the needles.
Don't forget he's stepping over a log or a branch.
Working with beginners, there is a lot of emphasis on recognizing sign. Instructors with each group point out the sign and help students understand what they are seeing. And understanding and interpreting what you see isn't easy. In this class, there were people who had experience with successful searches, but who felt that they weren't quite ready for the speed and subtleties of intermediate or advanced trackers. More experienced trackers can tell a number of characteristics from a careful reading or cutting of the available sign. They can tell number and characteristics of persons, the age of the sign, and the direction being traveled, among other things. The physical condition and mental attitude also is generally reflected by the length of stride, manner and impact of shoes, heels, and toes. Persons carrying extra weight, such as backpacks, are indicated by the impact of prints, care taken to maintain balance, or whether or not it was necessary to sidestep through or around trees and brush. When a person is lost, there is usually a stride change at the top of a ridge or a hill near some definite landmark. The slowing and closing of stride as obstacles approach indicate a cautious or wary person. Whether a person is trying to evade his pursuers is something we'll cover briefly in the military section of this videotape. But suffice to say for now that attempts to camouflage sign generally indicate a wee bit of guilty conscience, to say the least.
One of the most critical things to tell from sign or to read from sign is the age or the time since the sign has been made. All sign from the instant it's made begins the aging process, which is actually, with vegetation, a process of nature to heal or to cure the vegetation. With on dirt or open barren ground, it's a process by which the sign is worn away by the natural elements or affected by the natural elements.
The sun dries, causes color changes, wilts, and evaporates moisture or sap from damaged vegetation, aiding its healing process. The wind aids drying, blows small particles of dirt across sign. It blows grasses and bushes, helping them return to their natural condition.
The dew at night will cause a change. It refreshes vegetation that has been damaged during the day. A wilting in the afternoon sun will be refreshed at night by the dew at night. Frosting and freezing, of course, will affect in the usual manner by securing or stilling the aging process during the time that it's frozen or cooled. Rain obviously can wash sign out, wash it away entirely, or erode portions of it. However, rain gives us one of a good indication of when sign was created, before or after the last rain, or whatever time is consistent with the known time of the last rainfall. So it's actually a good aging process, or a good cue to tell the process, the age of the sign from.
Complicated? We need to underscore the need for training and experience in tracking. To make things really confusing, the possible combinations of all these signs tell different things. But that requires a number of training sessions and a fair amount of experience, either from training or actual searches. While the beginners are looking at basic recognition, a similar exercise is underway for more advanced trackers. To make the advanced classes a little more challenging, a real-life simulation was planned for one of the sheriff's units attending the class. A friend of one of the instructors was pressed into service as a fugitive. Charlie, as he was called, was off through the woods to avoid the law enforcement officers. After checking the car, very clear sign is discovered heading off into the brush, and the team begins to follow the prints. Because this is a training exercise, they are more methodical than normal, but that provides a good example.
That's probably the best.
Look at this.
That's the best
See
waffle
see
pattern
that?
we've
Yeah.
got right there. Okay, we'll just work on that aspect. Okay, based on with the recent rain we've had and everything, we don't have much depth as far as moisture goes. So this track's been since the last rain. We got.
Light conditions today are fairly good for cutting sign. The tracks are easily seen as they go off into the woods. But light is another important aspect to cutting sign. This footprint is much more obvious to our tracking team from this angle than from the other side because of the highlights provided by light. Because light is so important, you probably can guess that night tracking is possible with the use of a flashlight. In some ways, it can be even easier because you can rotate your light source to check for sign from all angles. Meanwhile, Charlie has tried to fool our trackers by crossing the road. The sandbanks mean that he left clear sign of his passage, and the team easily follows him, again keeping up a stream of constant communication, ever mindful that this is a training session.
Track still got dry dirt in it. Still raining. It's been here within the last few minutes.
A clear footprint in the gravel. Charlie has walked along the side of the road, and our trackers take a measurement to check against the first prints they found. The gravel allows them to take their measurement without worrying about adding confusing sign. This sheriff's exercise is utilizing more advanced trackers, and we use them to illustrate some examples of sign.
You've got a heel right here. Margins are pretty clear. The rocks are all compacted. Good even edges. We have transfer of dirt right in here. We've got a kick right here, and he's generally smashed this grass flat right in here.
Okay, you've got a foot has stepped right here and has pushed this grass all forward, is what we call flagging. And it's all going in the direction of
travel,
travel.
yeah.
The recent rain has laid a trap for Charlie, and the trackers find vines with the water drops knocked off where he passed by.
These are clean.
In addition, he has stepped on this leaf. The resultant sign is called Crayyy, and an experienced tracker can tell not only that Charlie passed this way, but how long ago he came through by knowing some elementary facts about how plants repair damage.
You can see where it's going. It's all covered with dirt. You've got a tear out here with a little bleeding right in there.
As the pursuit of Charlie grows hotter, a scraped twig and some dirt transferred to pine needles show that Charlie has come this way. Next, they find a twig broken and the bark scraped off. Charlie has crossed a fence and headed down toward the river. One of the best places to see sign is along natural barriers. These are streams, banks, ridges, or vegetation lines, or they may be fields, roads, or fences. Whatever the natural barrier, they are places which show sign well, and which are difficult to cross without leaving sign. Another dead giveaway, which can be like an arrow for tracking by helicopter, an advanced skill which is covered in another videotape, is a condition called shine, which Charlie has left as he went through the grasses near the river.
This grass trail is a good illustration of shine. The grass which has been depressed by the footfall and has only returned a portion of the vertical normal vertical angle reflects light differently than the rest of the grass around it, therefore leaving you a consistent trail of, as we would call in sign cutting trade, shine. This same grass trail and the shine is the type of sign that is very easily and readily apparent to a helicopter pilot flying from the air.
Since Charlie had dinner that night with his pursuers, we presume they caught him. A third major area covered in this training session was used by the military. Once again, a scenario was created to add a little realism to the class. The scene, upriver from a nuclear power plant, a logical target for insurgents. The job to track and capture one or more people suspected of trying to sabotage operation of the plant in such a way that it would cause a major regional disaster. Approaching by water, our trainees find what appears to be a single set of tracks leading away from the water's edge. Apparently, the person was dropped or swam to this point and disappeared into the woods lining the river. Again, a three-man team is used, but the element of security has been added. The lead tracker deploys his security overwatch and begins to examine the track with his crew, trying to make the same observations we saw earlier with our sheriffs and search and rescue teams.
It looks like they're trying to hide the number of people they've got. They definitely can't hide that there's somebody came up here, but they're all stepping one inside the other. You see that? And also the last guy to step in is wearing a tennis shoe over top of the vibrams. He's stepping over top of the vibrams.
As you can see, Joel has been a little trickier here and is using this exercise to cover a couple of the obvious attempts at camouflage.
Let's call in the flanks and show them what we've got here in case anything comes in from the other direction. If you walk around the other side of me, you'll have the sun angle at the right angle.
As with our other teams, the three head up the beach. In this instance, the security overwatch shadows the team, staying alert for signs of danger.
We've got two guys following this line. You've got one following that with a tennis shoe. Why don't you take one of the flankers and go on that one? If it gets out there too far and it doesn't look like it's going to come back into mine, we'll call another team.
The tracks converge again, and the whole team proceeds cautiously up a road, discovered just the other side of the beach. The lead tracker has cut a sign cutting stick. Note that the lead tracker is ticking off each footprint as he passes. This is important, particularly for beginners. A curve is made with a tick on the right or left side, depending on which shoe made the track. This helps narrow the next prime sign area. By following the track step by step, it is easier to make sure the sign cutter has found every step.
Yeah, there it is.
A cut branch gives a further clue of things to come.
He broke it off and then cut it with a knife, it looks like there.
Now I wonder if maybe they're thinking about trying to wipe out their tracks. I think he's definitely headed for the plant.
Yeah, looks like it. Look here, he's trying to throw us off. Got a little brush out mark here.
Right.
All right, follow the brush out here and you can see what he broke that limb off for. The only thing we're going to have to be careful of now is that you don't cut off to the side any place. Here's some leaves from the brushy that matches that bush up there. Here's his prints. You can see him. He's walking backwards, brushing in front of him. Here's his heel and his foot. He's dragging his heel back out of it.
Really very good.
Knowledge of tracking, by the way, is also a good way to know the tricks for evading pursuers. But this is a subject also covered in more detail in another videotape. So there you have the rudiments of tracking. We have given you a brief overview of how tracking can be useful in search and rescue, in law enforcement, and in military applications. We have shown you the basics of what sign is and some of the tools and tricks of the sign cutter.
Welcome back to Tactical Rifleman, guys. We're gonna do some tracking today, okay? But we're here with my good friend Peter Kerr. Peter's with TTOS, that's Tactical Tracking Operations School, and you guys teach the military,
yes,
right? And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna discuss the basic tenets of tracking in your method, right, or your methodology.
Correct.
For those of you guys who are new to our channel, we've done a tracking video in the past discussing a lot of the very basics of recognizing footprints,
nice,
and measuring and that kind of thing, the step-by-step method with Sue LaRue. You can check that out in our video archive. So we're out here in Arizona with Peter now, and we're going to expand that knowledge. So lay it on me, brother.
All right, right on. Yeah, Peter Kerr with Tactical Tracking Operations School. I appreciate you guys having us out and being able to demonstrate this. We're going to basically expand on your previous video. The basics that Sue taught, the step-by-step method. Now, we teach a little more aggressive style of tracking. It's with tactical or combat tracking. And the intent there is to close with the target or the individual as rapidly as you possibly can. So we have a couple different techniques we use. We call it a macro track, where we're using sometimes micro tracking and then macro, looking out to the furthest sign that we can see, moving forward in a tactical formation, closing that time and distance. And that's the objective. So we'll go over here a little bit of the basics. All right.
Some tracks for us. Yeah. We're going to start with just our print recognition.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, first thing we're always looking at is identifying the tracks you're going to follow, right? You got to sort the fish from the stream. In a situation like this, lots of contamination. It's a parking area, tracks everywhere. So you actually have to go through the process and identify the tracks you want to follow. Otherwise, it's time wasted. You get on the wrong tracks, track all day, good job tracking, wrong target. All right, so we always try to sort that out, and there's different processes of doing it. There's a whole crime scene exploitation piece that we do during the course. We talk about how you break it down, identify the key prints, and then sort those out and then to determine direction of flight or departure. Basics are, I'm going to lay down a set of tracks. We basically rake this out here so you got a good visual. This costs you nothing to do. Anyone can do this. And for you folks at home, this is an easy drill to do. It really is. And I'm just going to lay down a set of tracks, all right? So I'll just walk down along here, casually walking. Try to look out so you make it a natural gait and stride, all right? We'll come back and we'll start taking a look at the tracks themselves, all right? All right. So the first thing we're looking to do is identify those key prints, right? Now, never just rely on your memory, especially if you're old like myself, because it fails you. All right, so we always document the footprints. And typically when somebody steps off, you want to give it a few steps or paces into it, the movement, before you start collecting on it. And the reason we do this is that I might start off slow, like, damn, I got a long ways to go. Or maybe I just committed a crime, I get out of the vehicle, I bail, then maybe I'm in contact, make contact, break contact, I take off, I dart out into the bush, then I slow it down. We want to start to establish that rate of movement, right? So we'll sit there and give it a few steps in, let it average out, and then I'll start looking at it. We'll start off, right? I got a right, a left, right, left, so on and so forth. Starts to clear up a little bit here, so we'll take a look at it. First thing I'm going to do is document it. If this is the tracks I wish to follow, maybe I tied it into the contact site, an IED emplacement, bailing out of a vehicle, taking off. This is my guy. So now I'm going to collect on this. I want to come down. The first thing I'll do is I'm going to use the time shadow effect, right? The sun, natural light to my advantage, right? Right now this is an optimal time, about an hour, hour and a half after sunrise to about an hour, hour and a half before high noon. Those are optimal times to tracks, and it's just an angle thing. Right? You always want to place yourself on the opposite side of the available light source. In this case, it's the sun. If we were doing night tracking or whatnot, I may have an artificial light. All right, so the good way to remember this, if my shadow, I'll just step across, is being cast over the tracks, I'm on the wrong side. And it's not impossible to track this way, you know, and there's certain environments, diffused lighting, whatnot, in forested or jungle environment where you're gonna have a lot of shadow, but it's definitely a lot easier to track by placing the track line between you and available light source. It also allows you to sit there and see deeper into the tracks. I start to get the shadow effect, and you heard me say that earlier. And that's just the depth of these cleats and lugs into the ground. I actually can see the shadow, and you can see it going out if you extrapolate the line. All right, so place the tracks between you and available light source. We'll typically come out, take a camera. I like to post up on it and set up, try to create the same distance every time in height and distance when I take a picture. I'll take it one picture without contaminating it. Then I'll come down and I'll mark it. I'll put a marker down, a reference. The reason I take one prior to going down and measuring it and putting my marker there is that I don't, happens if I'm carrying a weapon, I've got equipment on, I go to bend down and measure this or whatnot, my barrel sweeps across it, I've contaminated it. So if I take one prior to even getting close to it, now I've got that. So if I do mess up or whatnot, I haven't contaminated everything. I still have something to work off of. This is still good. Now I'll put a marker down. In the field, you guys have all seen this in the crime scene investigations, whatnot, right? They have the little TPs law enforcement uses to do crime scene investigations. Really hard to pack around. They break in your pack, it's excess gear, etc. We'll use either golf tees, spent brass works, whatnot. You can put, if you have multiple targets or multiple suspects, just take a Sharpie, put number 1, number 2, number 3 on the different ones, and you can use those to identify each different type of footwear. In this case, I got a piece of brass, simply my identifiable marker. I'll just put that down. This is primarily so that when I document this, remember, this has to go up to higher, right? I got to report on this. This is going to go into my mission log, my report, my after action report, so on and so forth, or it's evidence in law enforcement. So I have to be able to identify it. Next thing, when you're measuring, try to get a scale. In this case, I've got a tape measure. We recommend carrying one along. You can use it for a couple of things I'll demonstrate. But you want to try to get it down to about the same depth of the track, all right? And the reason being is if it's above it, right? If it's suspended, say this is really soft substrate or soil, and it's a deep track, if I just laid this on the surface, then those tracks would have, that footprint would appear a little bit smaller, right? So I want to try to get it down to about the same depth, you know, and you can just dig a little trench out with your fingers. It's not going to be perfect. Remember, we're not crime scene investigators. All we're trying to do is identify the tracks we wish to follow, document it, place that individual or target at the event or the incident, and then from there, start to form up, get into formations, and move off and close the time and distance with them. All right, so I'll get this down. I just put this out, and again, this is just for photography and evidence. That looks good to me. I've got it down on the depth. If I go too deep, then it does the opposite. It makes the track look a little bigger. I'll come back up to my position, snap a shot. Boom, I've documented it, good to go, you know. Now, on top of documenting with digitally or with a camera, cell phone, whatever means you have to capture that, we also take the time to sketch it out, because we all know Murphy, right? He's alive and well, and guaranteed you get out there, and if you're just relying on that electronic device, something's gonna happen to it. River crossing, it gets damaged, batteries die, whatever. I don't have a reference to work back, so I'll sit there and sketch it out. Once I have that, you know, if there's multiple suspects, I'll continue that. We spend what we call a little bit of time up front to correctly identify the tracks. It saves you hours and sometimes half a day out there on the track, because if you get out there and you track the wrong guy, it's all for nothing, or you get into contamination.
So in order to get into the macro tracking, you got to start with a micro,
yes,
and then you kind of figure out what's going on.
Correct. So
move up.
Yeah, there's that's exactly right. So Sue teaches a step-by-step method, great method. We use that for crime scene investigations or exploiting a crime scene, right? We'll get out there and we'll actually take that time and place that individual. Maybe we start from out where we pick up the tracks and work our way back to the event or the incident or the evidence. But we'll take that time. If there's multiple, hey, who got out, who's in place that IED, or who got out of the front of the vehicle, who was the driver, who was the occupants, you can go down and work that out around a vehicle and figure out who is who just based on where they stepped out. So we use the micro tracking. Other times we'll use the micro tracking is contamination. We come into an area that's just heavily contaminated, right? Lots of other, and contamination can be other foot traffic, human traffic, if you will, vehicle traffic, animal traffic, anything that can contaminate or make it harder. And we'll get in there and we'll micro track through that to work our way through the area. Typically in a tactical environment, we will operate as at a minimum on a tactical environment, a two-man team, right? That's it. You have a tracker and a cover man, because I'm always having to look down, search for the next tracks. My eyes are dropping. I should be situationally aware and scanning, and take my own security into my own hands. But it's always better to have somebody right there that he's looking long, he's not getting sucked in and tracking, he's covering my ass as we're moving along. It allows me to do my job better. And then if I do my job well, which is the tracking part, and I would close with, make contact, he gets the gun on, right? He comes up and he can engage, he's my protection. Ideally, we like to teach to run at a minimum 4-man teams when you're doing a tactical. That allows me to have a tracker / team lead / cover man. He can move back. He's in charge of the whole formation, what we're going to do, where I'm going to send the flanks, how fast we're moving, so on and so forth. It also gives me a left and right flank that I can push them out. If we're coming up on this berm, tracks are leading to it, do we want to walk right up to it? Probably not.
Less so.
Yeah, it's a danger area. So I can take my flanks and say, hey, we're going to hold here. We'll set up a base and we'll move those flanks around. They'll clear the backside, the defilade, whatnot. And then from there, we can move up. They give the thumbs up. We haul ass up there. The same time they're clearing, they may have found tracks. And now we just closed 100, 200 meters off the track line. So we try to incorporate the whole team into a tracking event. But we'll get into that. A little bit about the basics since you brought it up. So there's basically 3 types of tracking as we look at it. There's what we call an indigenous method, and that may be like uncle, father, whatnot, somebody taught you. In third world cultures and stuff, people still use tracking to this day.
Sure.
The Bedouins, phenomenal trackers. They have to maintain their livestock. They go out there and track goats through the desert and they can account for all of them. It's just something that little kids, when I was actually over in Israel, which was pretty cool, we were working with your IDF trackers and then your border guard, Gashashim, I believe.
Gashashim. That's actually the word means tracking.
Yeah.
It's a tracker. Yeah.
Yeah, it was phenomenal, but it was funny. The one guy, the Bedouin, he goes, in America, your kids play hide and go seek. He goes, here, our kids play hide and go track. And it always stuck with me. I was like, I love that. Yeah.
So we use them as well in our unit.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go set up a hide site or whatever it is that we're doing. We'll bring them in to look for us, right? And if they find us, get up, do it again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Get up, do it again, get up, do it again. You start kind of figuring out what they're looking for, but yeah. Okay.
No, that's excellent.
Let's keep going.
That's excellent. So you have your indigenous method, the step-by-step method, which you talked about, and that's basically, just to recap on Sioux, they have a nice little stick that's measured out, and they're basically trying to get the distance for a step and establish a pace or a stride. And they'll sit there and mark it off and move it around. So this is my left foot. They'll measure it up, maybe extend it out a little bit. They have a series of rings they use. And again, this works really good for micro tracking, but we can't spend the time going slow. We want to close that time distance gap. The guy may be headed for a border, safe haven, whatnot. We need to close with him as fast as possible, interdict. But they'll move the stick around and say, okay, I've got the next one. They'll come up here, somewhere within this arc should be the next one, so on and so forth. Good method. We do it the same thing, but instead of, thank you, sir. Instead of having a useless stick, you can use your weapon, same thing. You can just come down and you can sit there. It's a little shorter, but somewhere at the tip of my barrel, I should find the next one. So if I'm moving up and it's really hard ground and all of a sudden I lose the tracks, I'm gonna step back to the last one, scan out, see if I see anything at distance, nothing, bring my eyes back in. Then I can come up and go, okay, somewhere out here. Oh, okay, I got a partial print here. Direction of travel is still headed down this road. So same thing, if you're down and then it's contact, you can come up, right? So it's an option. It's the recommended one for tactical or combat tracking. The next thing is what we call is the macro tracking. All right, so it's a combination of both, obviously the indigenous methods, having home field advantage or growing up in an environment, or if you just work in one area or one region, you become very good at tracking in that environment. And it's just because you get to see the same type of substrates, the different types of vegetation, you're there constantly, you get very good. Unfortunately for our military, they have gun and will travel, right? We're always fighting abroad. So they have to become good in multiple environments. So we use indigenous method, the stick method or step-by-step to sort things out, process, collect evidence, get through hard areas, and then the macro side. Now the macro side, basically, if I've got a good track line I've established, documented, this is the print I'm following, I've got a direction to travel, we just use cardinal directions, head it west, Now I start to look out and extrapolate that line out. Some conditions, optimal conditions, like good substrate like this, what we have out here, you can sometimes see the tracks out 100, 200. On glass, you can bring your weapon system up, scan out. If you got binos, 300, 400 meters out. Really? You can be scanning out, yeah.
As long as you have a light source on the other side of the tracks, you're going to see them better.
Yeah, correct.
Right? So even further out.
Yep.
Okay.
So it allows you to sit there and see out. And the intent with that is, one, not doing this, head down, tracking all day long, not having my head up looking for the bad guy. So in the macro, I look, I scan out, I look for the furthest. At the same time, I look for enemy. Do I see movement? Do I see him cresting over that ridge, moving through the bush? This guy, he's fleeing from us, he's moving, so there's a potential of seeing him. That's why it's optimal to have a team. One guy's tracking, cover man's covering in close, left and right flanks, covering left, right, forward, and then even rear security. If you have a 5 or 6 man team, you can have one guy just sitting back on glass, and maybe he has a long reach capability, 7.62 and above, that he could reach out and touch that person if needed. But he's constantly scanning, and you can be amazed at how fast you can track out here. We've had units, when we ran the combat tracker program down at Fort Huachuca from 06 to 12, and it's a similar environment to this, very similar, but we'd have teams running on the tracks all day long. They just get into a real good rhythm, just tearing it up and closing that time distance gap, constantly applying pressure on the quarry or the target. All right, so that's kind of the macro method of it. I scan out. If I see it up here, I can eliminate all this. Once I see a track, like I look up and maybe by that wood spool there's another set of tracks. I could literally, as tracker, it's like, hey, I've got it. I can start hauling up here. I'll drop my head, look down, confirm, but I'm moving out, right? And the whole team's moving with me. We try to teach that the tracker sets the pace. So if the tracker's moving slow, the team moves slow. Tracker's picking it up, the team's got to pick it up. The only time you would change that up is if you're starting to close that time distance and the contact is in it. Now I'm going to start to slow down a little bit so I don't run into an ambush. Hey, slow it down, head up, everyone starts scanning. Maybe I start using my flanks a little more aggressively to clear areas. Start looking, hey, we're closing. And there's certain indicators that we teach during the course that can give you that reference. And just for simple, and the purposes of this event, something would be like fresh spit, right? The guy spit or whatnot, he took a piss. I'm tracking up and I still have foam in that stain where he stopped and took a piss. That tells me, hey, we're close. Insects are great for that also. Steps on an ant hive, they're all spun up. Usually within about 15, 20 minutes for them to settle back down, I'm close. So there's little indicators like that. In certain environments, there's reactive vegetation, which is really cool. Hawaii, Southeast Asia, different areas have it. Call it like sleeping grass, and you actually step on it and it closes up. It takes about 3 to 5 minutes for it to open back up. So as you're tracking along, like when we run a jungle warfare program out East Range, 25th Infantry Jungle Warfare School, there's a lot of it out there, but that's a great indicator. So I'm tracking along and I see the track line going across and that little ground covering's closed up. You've closed with him. He's within 3 to 5 minutes of you, probably laying up in the bushes somewhere up in front of you. And all you're doing is building a database, what ground sign looks like, so ground signs are marks and impressions left on the ground. That can be from the bottom of your boot. It could be a knee print like I have right here. If I sit down, if I lay gear out, ground sign, then aerial sign if you're working in a vegetated area. That's anything from the top of your boots up to head high, hands high, or external gear. Anything that can come in contact with the vegetation. And we'll just go out, we'll send guys out, and we'll have 2 or 3 back, and they'll track up, and we'll just do this. And all we're doing is building this database. So now they can start recalling. They can see what this environment has to offer and know what to look for, and they see it once, they're starting to pick it up. About the 2nd or 3rd iteration that they do this, now they're starting to see tracks out at distance, and it's no longer, oh, that's just a kicked over twig or broken twig or a bent leaf or a little scuff on the ground. They're like, oh, that's an indicator. So we spend a lot of time doing that. So that's just a little bit on the background of the styles of tracking that we do. Back to what we were doing here. So I've identified the tracks, right? So now I want to sit there, and this is the guy I'm going to follow. I let him step off. He's starting to establish his rate of movement. All right, why is rate of movement important?
Well, you got to know how fast, of course, they're going, where they're going, how you're going to have to move, how you're going to have to move your forces.
Right on. Right? Yep. Smart man
Daylight
here.
goes away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you want to sit there and to determine how far ahead they are, and now you can come up with what we have to do to close that time distance gap, right? So a simple one, contact, break contact. We're patrolling up and we're coming out here looking for a fight, right? We make contact, we kill 6, and 2 run off, right? So we clear this area, assess, right? We got it. Hey, we do a little 360 around the area. Hey, we have 2, or maybe we had a visual seeing a couple dudes running off over there. We'll go over there, process that, identify the tracks. Now we're going to close that time distance gap. You know, we just saw them. Maybe it took us about 15, 20 minutes to secure the area, call it in, refit, whatnot. And then we're going to step off and track. So now we got a 10, 15 minute time window, time and distance gap we have to close. So we start looking at that. Hey, we can run them down. We can be a little more aggressive. Other scenarios, hey, there was an IED in place. That was a common one, right? Guys would come in and put in an IED the night prior. It may be a pre or post blast situation, but the site was identified either by making contact and activating it, or having it detonated on them, or somebody saw it and we're going to exploit it. But now you've got maybe a 12, 24-hour window. It's like, how do you close that time distance gap? What we promote is using multiple teams. And that's, on an open environment, you can plus up your teams about 6 to 8. That's a good sized team. That gives me additional flankers if I need it. Allows me to clear, allows me to cut off 2 or 3 individuals and have them go out at distance, 2, 3 click.
In addition to all that, all the conversations you and I have had about this, you get a lot into the psychology of whoever it is that you're tracking, right?
Correct, yeah.
So explain that a little bit,
okay.
Because that gets very interesting. We're no longer looking at footprints and just looking at, okay, where could this guy have gone? I mean, you're really getting into what's moving this guy's gears internally.
Yeah, that's huge. When you're tracking somebody, think about it like reading a book. All right, 1 footprint is a word, 10 is a sentence, a couple hundred is a paragraph, so on and so forth. The more you track, the longer you track somebody, the more you learn about them. So just by breaking it down to the footprint. All right, so if this was a pair of slippers or flip-flops or athletic shoes or whatnot, all right, and he's moving towards some very aggressive terrain, it's like, okay, is he prepared for this? Maybe not. And that's the case in a lot of the law enforcement and situations I used to deal with. We get called up, hey, stolen vehicle or suspect fleeing from law enforcement, bails out. They're not prepped. But now you see, okay, he's got good footwear. That tells me, one, all right, he at least has the proper footwear to traverse this type of terrain. All right, so you learn that much just from that. What they found early on in Afghanistan and even in Iraq, the foreign fighters, the type of footwear they were wearing, they were coming in with their mountaineering boots and whatnot. They came prepared for the fight, so they started seeing vibrant type patterns, and those were typically what the foreign fighters and Chechens and whatnot were coming in with. They were prepared. The Iranians happen to actually use also a vibrant type footprint. So they could tell when, really? Yeah, they could tell when Quds Force was slipping across the border. But so that footwear tells you a lot. Or it's an indigenous footwear. Like in certain parts, like Afghanistan, they have their favorite slippers or type of footwear. Different regions, the FARC in Colombia, they would issue a rubber boot. That was their, it was like, those waiter type boots that you would use for shoveling.
Muck boots?
Muck boots, there you go. They actually issued those. They had a distinct footprint, so you knew who you were dealing with. So the footwear itself, okay, gait analysis. What we're looking at, let's back it all the way up. So we'll talk about primary impact point. All right, so first thing you want to determine, okay, here's a footprint. What's the direction of travel, right? All right, so primary impact point is typically the first part of the footwear, to hit the ground. If they're
walking
forward.
If they're forward.
Walking forward, there will be the heel.
I got you.
If they're walking backwards, like a deception technique, then it's the ball of the foot, and we'll just do it side by side so you can see. All right, so you note primary impact point, I got a really nice clean impression here, right, in the heel. as I start to move forward, we call it the foot roll. And that's just that natural articulation of the foot. As I move forward and transfer weight from my left foot, all the weight's going into it, I pick up that right foot and I go to step back down, primary impact point, transferring the weight, you have that foot roll. So depending on the substrate, the foot roll, like in loose sand, is really deep, right? We all run in sand for fun. But you get a nice toe push back, it pushes a lot of soil back. So that's the natural articulation. We call this a toe dig. Sometimes you have a toe drag. If somebody's tired carrying weight, you start to see it. Their toe drags. If it's uneven ground, you see that a little bit more. That helps to give a direction of travel. You have a little bit of the soil push forward, whatnot. But this gives you clear heel, good heel strike, foot roll, soil push back, accelerating and pushing my energy, my body forward and off my plant foot. That will push that soil back. So that's what we get off that. That gives us a direction of travel. Okay, appears to be walking forward, right? So this footwear, walking this way. And then we call this the terminal point, which is the last part. So primary, impact, foot roll, and terminal. I mean the last part of the foot that's on the ground. All right, so we'll look at that. And the deception technique of walking backwards still is used to this day, crossing borders. Typically what that tells me, anyone who uses deception techniques, if I'm just out like doing a recon of a road or an area to see if there's activity, if I see anyone doing any type of deception technique, like when I'd look for groves, I'd look for where they'd try to conceal their entrances and their trails. That told me they were up to no good, right? Because anyone who's just casually walking around or just doing their routine, you know, they're not taking the time to conceal their movement or deceive you. So I'll look, but this walking backwards, this is typically used and it's for crossing roads. The intent is, I'll just do it up here. You know, I'm coming up, I gotta cross this road. ¿Estados Unidos aquí? Ah, bueno. No. And then I walk backwards, right? Now, and the intent is that casual patrol, border patrol, whatnot, passing by, comes along and goes, oh, he went this way. Now, so it's kind of important you understand the dynamics of a footprint. So we'll rake this out here in a minute, clean it up, and do it again. So you want to establish the direction of travel, again, determine if it's a deception technique or not. All right, so that's what I get off of one footprint. The other things I can get off of it is you can get approximate height calculations, you know? And again, bracket this. It's not 100% because there are hobbits out there. I've seen some dudes with like 14-inch feet. Well, I don't have the 14-inch feet. They are hairy though. No. But that was an SF dude actually. This dude, he got the call sign Hobbit after the class. It was actually on Sue's class. But the dude had really big feet. And so it looked like he would be really tall, but his stride was short. All right, so that was some of those anomalies, if you will. So, possibly a smaller guy, right?
Right.
You know, now, again.
Now, there are the general dimensions, yes, right? Kind of that golden ratio that typically happens, right? Your foot, and this is not always true, but it's typically true, where your foot is going to be about the length of your forearm, your fist is going to be about the width of the ball of your foot, that kind of thing. Yep. But it's not 100% accurate.
No. Well, look at John Wayne. What was he, 6'2", something like that? And he had a size 8 foot.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the reverse.
Yeah. So saying. You can't, you know, it's not in stone. Hey, this guy is that. It's like, hey, it appears to be. You know, and especially if you're going to document this stuff, don't ever commit to it unless you're 100%. You know, you can make, you know, assumptions or whatnot and go, hey, it appears to, but unless you know, you know. And there's other ways to determine actually how tall somebody is. As you follow the tracks, like if I was to take a knee, then you can start to get a little bit bigger picture. Okay, tip of the toe to the knee. Okay, short calf. If I prone out, now I got a good, you know, hey, he proned out, took a position here looking back. Okay, now I can start to look, I can start to identify even potentially external gear. If he's got a pack, if he's got load-bearing equipment, you know, weapon systems, you know. Yeah, if you want, we'll knock this out, we'll break this down real quick, then I'll lay out some of those marks or impressions so that they can see at home. Saw him running off, indication, right? But if you just came up and there's a set of tracks here, you want to establish how fast and how far could he move in the time of incident, time of arrival. So off of this, you basically are looking at establishing a pace, right? And in the military world, everyone knows their own pace count, right? At least they should back when they did land nav.
Absolutely.
So you just can use that as a reference. What is your pace count? And this, you know, 100 meters in this environment, flat ground, etc. We can sit there and you can measure it out. You want to sit there and collect a little bit more. We'll go from heel to heel of the left foot here to the right, An average pace for most people, if they're just casually walking, we just kind of bracket it. It's about 30, 36 inches, you know, and depending on the size. In the military, it's funny in that because they're trained to march in unison, you'll see that most people have about the same average pace. It's a conditioned pace, if you will. But so we'll measure that out, start to establish it. Other ways of doing it is the speed of movement is, you know, so that was an average walk. I just walked across, you know, walking very slow. You'll see this. You know, I had 34 inches there. Somebody's walking slow. Maybe I'm tired. You may have some of that. That's a good thing when you see like this when you're tracking. You know, you start off, he's moving pretty decent rate. Hour, 2 hours into it, he starts dragging his toes. He's starting to get tired. So now I start to look, okay, where's someplace shady? Out here in the desert, it's great. On a hot day, in the middle of the day, typically what you see is when they start dragging toes or they're moving slow, you just have to look for the best shade out there. You stop, send the flanks out there. Like from here, there's a good tree out there. Somebody would walk over there and sure as if he's not laying there, you're gonna have marks and impressions where he rested. I've seen where guys have stood behind a cactus, a saguaro cactus. They lay down on the ground behind the shadow just to get out of the sun. So you try to establish that speed. I'll just kind of move over here. You know, again, somebody walking fast, walking slow, good to go. Maybe somebody running. Stuff like that. So we go through this in the course. Oh, go ahead.
Now you're essentially getting half the steps per the distance, you know, pretty much.
Correct.
Right? I mean, you're getting a lot less. Your gait is getting a lot narrower.
Yeah. That's
right? And you're getting about half of the foot. You're really only getting the front half of the foot.
Yeah, depending on the speed.
At a faster speed of running.
Yep.
Right.
So what tends to happen is we talk about stride, pitch, straddle, pressure, and dwell time. All right, those are what we're looking at when we teach the tracking. I won't go into great depth on that because it's, you know, we spend about 4 hours doing this with new students, and we'll go through this, then we'll take it out and do it. Just to cap it, so stride, we just did that, 34 inches. Pitch is basically it's innate to each individual, and pitch is a good way of knowing your own pitch. If I just jump up and come down, I can establish a pitch. Now you'll notice pitch changes. As I speed up, pitch turns in. As I slow down, it opens up. Same with straddle. All right, and straddle, pitch is the angle of your foot. So that's my natural pitch. We look like this. If you notice, I have a more positive pitch on my right foot than I do my left due to an injury. So that's an individual characteristic. If I had 3 dudes wearing the same type of footwear, issued gear, footwear, and one had an individual pitch like this, I could separate him from the group. I could identify him. Maybe that footprint and that pitch was associated with a weapon system, an IED, an incident, or a piece of evidence. I could identify that individual. And same with wear characteristics on the boots. You know, maybe I have scars, lugs, etc. But pitch is basically, we just keep it simple, you know, because we train the military, so we gotta, no, just joking. This is a positive pitch, right? A neutral pitch. And then what we call is a negative pitch is where the toes are turned in. That transitions, right? As I move, if I slow down, my pitch opens up, and so does my straddle. Straddle is basically the width, and you asked about what we can learn from a track line. Looking at this, my track line leading out of here, I've got about 34-inch step or stride. You can tell small feet, narrow, potentially small stature. And why I can assess that is if I was big boned, you know, guys got big muscles, big legs or whatnot, big feet, you can kind of see in their gait when you're doing gait analysis that, hey, it appears to be a bigger dude. He's got bigger feet, wider straddle, I mean bigger body, so on and so forth. So a lot goes into this. It's the science, if you will, of the tracking.
So really quickly, what are the key differences that you will notice between like a male and a female gait?
So, you know, we've done some study on this, and I know in one of the military manuals, it was saying, oh, you can tell the difference between the hips, you know, and straddle. We've done a lot of studies on it, and what we found, and it's really hard to tell, especially in a military context where women are trained and conditioned to walk the same as men, and you can't. Yeah, a little maybe a smaller foot, but you go to Eastern Europe, there's women with big feet. You go to Southeast Asia and areas, there's men with small feet. You know, so it's really hard to tell just on that. The only time we've been able to really distinguish between them is if there's an accentuation in the walk. Like if a woman's feeling sexy and she struts across, you actually see that in the tracks. Like
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty funny actually. That runway model walk, if you will, you know, step over the heels, that swaying of the hips, you know, they're accentuating the movement.
Literally backwards of a normal gait.
Yeah, yeah. But if she's just kind of butchy and just doesn't care, then it's just going to look pretty similar. The only other way is that we tell and we put out, because we've done it. We've had women walk side by side, everyone turned away, come back and tell me which ones. We'll find a male with similar sized feet. And guys get it wrong half the time because it's just guessing.
Interesting.
But if they stop and urinate, then you have urine spatter where it's located. If they're separated from the group, you know, when they sleep, maybe at a Ron site or whatnot, you'll have the females sleep in one area. Then you can start to, hey, these footwear over there. Or if it's just a type of footwear. In some cultures, women wear certain types of shoes and men wear different, you know, so on and so forth. But that's like, we get into that, and I don't, you know, we don't have enough time to get that deep into the weeds.
Interesting. Okay, so let's move on.
Yeah. All right, so let's say, so we got stride pressure, stride, pitch, straddle, pressure, dwell time. Some of the other things we would look for is we ask about what we want to learn. If somebody has any other additional markings, if I stop, maybe I have water, marks and impressions of that. You know, I stop here, I put, maybe I have a weapon system, drink some water, I put it back in my ruck, whatnot. This is important, right? If we're in a tactical context, we want to know if we can find marks and impressions of a weapon system. You know, if they lay it down, you may have little hard marks where the buttstock hits, you know, any of the sharp edges, the water bottle, because that tells me what?
That tells you exactly what they have, where they're stopping.
Yeah, and it kind of gives you an idea that it could be a long day. If he's got water in the desert, that's kind of important. So that means he can sustain himself. The same with if you have marks and impressions of external gear. You know, when you start seeing stuff like this, it goes from, hey, it's going to be a short one. Like in law enforcement, a lot of times, dude bails out of the car, he's panicked, he takes off. He maybe goes 100, 200 meters and goes to the ground, brushes up, and just hopes that the cops do their random search and they don't bring the canines out. And then he waits, and when they leave, then he gets up and moves again. But now if he's continuing out of the area and you happen to come along and you see marks and impressions of the pack or whatnot, you know, hey, he's carrying some external gear, that means sustainment. He may have water, food, extra ammunition, whatnot. He's ready to go. He's got good footwear. He's carrying external gear. This could be a long day. So now, at the tactical level on the team and talking to command and control, I'm reporting this. It's like, hey, this could go a while. Let's start spinning up additional assets. Let's get birds in the air. Let's start pushing roving patrols along the roads forward of our position, see if they can set up, and you try to bump steer them, if you will. And that's where we really get into the tactics of it. And it's fun. I mean, when I used to hunt a lot when I was a kid and stuff like that. I started doing this, and this is so much more fun tracking another human being, because now it's your wits against theirs. Right. And then you start to try to get into their mind and predict where they're going to go, how they're going to move, how long they can stay out there. Now what do I have at my asset available to me, the assets I have available to close with, and you know.
And really, you can apply this. You can apply this to hunting, right? I mean,
oh, yeah.
If you're out hunting elk.
Yep.
You can apply this to the elk psychology. It's of course a different thought pattern.
Yep.
But this all applies in the same way, guys. If you're out trying to, you know, find a moose or an elk or whatever.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It doesn't matter if you're stalking. If you're stalking game, then definitely being able to track down and move into a position where you can fire and engage that elk or take that elk. Or even if you're just a tree stand, you know, where do you want to set up? You know, if you're just going to wait in a static position, you're going to go out and recce the area and look for those tracks. Say, hey, this is an optimal position. Why? Based on the track patterns I see. Hey, they move to and from here in the mornings, or they go to water sources. So yeah, it goes back to hunting, man. Back when we were cavemen.